Hello, church. Pastor Chris here to bring you today's daily fellowship, and we're going to continue where we've left off the past couple weeks. So if you haven't seen last week or the week before's Friday daily fellowship, I encourage you go back and watch those. And if not, we are going to be in 2 Kings chapter 5, the story of Naaman the leper. Now, Naaman was the commanders of the armies of Aram, and Aram was an opposing force to Israel. You all know the Israelites. Israel was the people of God in the Old Testament, this chosen people. Now, Naaman was the commander of the armies of Aram, meaning that he had surely overseen the killing and murdering of plenty of Israelites, and maybe even had done far, far worse things to the Israelites. Naaman was an enemy to Israel, was an enemy to God's people. And Naaman, we see earlier in this chapter, was a leper. He had been struck with the skin disease that was so terrible, something that would have made him a social outcast, would have surely been the end of the road for Naaman. And yet Naaman hears this idea of possible restoration in Israel. So he goes into Israel, into this enemy nation, and he goes into there and seeks out the prophet Elisha. And we talked last week about how Elisha told him to go do this ridiculous thing, to go wash in a dirty river to cure his leprosy. And so here's where our story picks up in 2 Kings chapter 5, starting in the 14th verse. It says, "So he went down and dipped himself in the Jordan 7 times, as the man of God had told him, and his flesh was restored and became clean like that of a young boy. Then Naaman and all his attendants went back to the man of God. He stood before him and said, 'Now I know that there is no God in all the world except in Israel.'" This is an incredible story of redemption that happens, and it's a story that should be encouraging for all of us. Naaman was undoubtedly a murderer. He was an enemy of the people of God. And yet, whenever Naaman comes humbled into the land of Israel, seeking restoration and healing, God meets him in this dirty river and offers not only healing for his body, it says transforms his skin to be like that of a young boy, but God offers restoration for his heart. God offers restoration for his mind and for his soul. And so I want to issue this word of encouragement to you today, church. Regardless of what your past looks like, your past could be just as bad as Naaman, being a murderer and being someone who'd done these horrible, awful things. Maybe even you are like him and have persecuted the people of God. Maybe you have a past that you think there's no possible way that God could accept this. But the story of Naaman is one of hope. That in the midst of having a terrible past, being somebody who is literally a murderer, God chooses to offer healing and restoration. And I believe that in our lives today, that God wants to bring about healing and restoration in each of us. For some of us, that might be in our body. For some of us, that might be in our mind. For some of us, that might be in our spirit or some other way. But I believe that just like Naaman, regardless of what your past looks like, that God desires restoration and healing for you. So church, know this, that regardless of who you are, regardless of where you come from, God desires healing and restoration for you. Church, you are loved and you are prayed for, and I cannot wait to continue this journey with you next week.